Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Yogesh Shavda. I'm the founder of Y2S Consulting, and I'm also the director for the Center for Marketing Solutions at the University of South Carolina. Today, we are going to talk about AI. Again, I've been talking about AI this entire year, and I'm going to continue talking about AI this entire year simply because it's such a hot topic, especially in the area of marketing. Today, we have Minisha Goel, who is what I would call a thought leader in this space. She's been publishing a lot of content on a lot of different social media channels, TikTok being one of them. That's how I actually found her. I started following her, since late last year, and I'm just been so enthralled by the quality of the content that she's putting out. I was like, I have to have her come and talk to us. And not only that, she's also just come out of doing a huge TEDx event in at Bath University in the UK. So I'm actually very curious to hear what she had shared there. Hopefully, she'll share some of that with us today as well. So, Manisha, thank you for being here today. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Yogesh. What a wonderful introduction. It's definitely been a journey, and thank you so much for your kind words.
Oh,
Being in the AI space is exciting space to be in, so I'm really excited to get into details about it.
of course. So let's before we get into the AI stuff, right? Let's start first about you. Tell us about who you are. What's your background? What got you into the AI space? Just give us a sense of that first.
Yeah, so you know what? My background is, I guess, a little bit unusual. I would say, I'm not sure if the viewers have heard of this term, but I'd say I have a bit of a squiggly career. And basically, what that means is that I have had a ton of different experiences which have led me to where I am right now. So I actually started my career in consulting. And I worked in management consulting, specifically within banking and finance, for at least 5 or 6 years. And I always knew that there was something beyond consulting for me. And so I moved into tech and I joined a kind of like a Series A tech startup within the space of AI, actually. And I really enjoyed my role there in operations, and I help scale the business and whatnot. But unfortunately, my time in that role was cut short, and I was made redundant during the times at which
Mm.
tech companies were making cuts and whatnot. And
Yeah.
this is precisely when I guess generative AI really became big and I started using it. And so that was my entry point, was this moment in time where I had so much free time to explore what I really wanted
Mhm.
to do, and using
Mhm.
this to help me, figure that out. Um,
Mm.
and that was my first introduction to AI.
Yeah. Wow. So, it's amazing how you said a couple of things which I think are really, interesting for people. One is that, okay, circumstances kind of like led you down that path. That happens to, it to different, in different ways to different people, of course. But the fact that you allowed your curiosity to kick in and to start experimenting and playing, that's the thing that really kind of like excites me in what you
Yeah,
just said, because there's so much, experimentation and curiosity that really drives the space right now in my mind, right?
absolutely. It's key. And I think, to give some more context as to how I got started with what I'm doing now with my training business, when I started using generative AI, the first kind of thing I was thinking, and the first track of thinking was, as an operations person, as a consulting person, my mind was just going to solving problems. And
Yeah.
so when using this very general purpose technology, I
Mm.
was like, well, a salesperson can use it like this, and an operations person can use it like this, and a marketing person could use it like this. And so I immediately was drawn and knew that the potential
Mhm.
for this in the future is going to be huge. But
Right.
that wasn't exactly kind of what drew me to actually setting up my business and really investing in it, because what really drew me to
Mm.
going down this path was the feeling that I got from using generative
Mm.
AI technology, right? I felt completely empowered with this technology because it just helped. It was like having an extension of my brain. The
Right.
things that would take me like 10 minutes to do, I'm able to do it in 1 minute. The things I
Mm.
don't have knowledge on, I can quickly get upskilled using this technology.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, I felt like I have this feeling, I want other people to have this feeling too.
No, I get that. I totally get that. So, as you're talking about that, like, in terms of this, like an extension of your brain, that's exactly right. Because it is like an extra like power pack or a brain pack, if you want to call it that, that connects to you, and it can do certain things that, you could do, but it would take you 3x the time. It's now being done within minutes, if not, even less. And you're getting that work done basically. So it's giving you that extra capacity to do different things basically, or think about things in different ways, right?
So
So
true. Yeah.
so let's dive a little bit into it. When you told me when I first spoke with you that you were going to do this TEDx event, right? So let's kind of like dive a little bit into that if you're okay with that. You
Yeah.
know, tell us what led up to the TEDx event. What was your presentation going to be about? Just walk us through what happened.
Yeah, okay, so I have to be careful here because I've had a lot of people asking me recently, since doing the TEDx Minisha, how do we apply for a TEDx? How do we do it? And my entry to doing TEDx was slightly different. So I last year, I made the active decision to find a mentor, and I had this great mentor within the AI space who is a very well-known public speaker,
Yeah,
and he was like, Nisha, one of the things that you need to do in order to, you know, build your brand and build yourself is you need to start doing public speaking.
yeah.
And so, he connected me with the TEDx organization in Bath and
Mhm.
Bath University, and that's kind of my entry point to doing the TEDx. But the experience itself was completely unique and
Mhm.
completely life changing because it it really made me think and grow in different ways in the sense of challenging my limiting beliefs about standing up, talking on stage, being that
Mhm.
thought leader to the rest of the world, and also really honing in on a message. The whole process of doing a TEDx is slightly different from venue to venue. um,
Mhm.
However, the idea behind the TEDx is that you have a key message that you want to share. And what is that key message? What is motivating you? And why are you qualified to speak about that? And
Right.
so, yeah, once you get into it, it can be quite difficult, coming up with the idea and
Mhm.
refining it and whatnot. But yeah, it was a challenge, but it's a rewarding challenge in the end.
Of course. So tell us what was the message that you were communicating in your TEDx?
Yeah, so the key message, I guess, in my TEDx was basically around the biggest barrier to AI adoption really isn't about technology at the moment, it's about our mindset. And
Mm.
so to thrive in this age of AI, we have to rethink the way that we learn, the way that we work. And more importantly, we need to stay curious, like you
Mm.
said.
So adoption, that's a big word in this world right now because I can think of like 10 different reasons why people want to do it and 10 different reasons why people don't want to do it, and they're concerned about generative AI being a solution in their work. People are afraid of their jobs being lost or other things that may be happening, in terms of what they're doing. So I'm curious to hear, you know, as you structured your message around that in terms of adoption, did you give any suggestions, or how did you kind of
Yeah.
like land the message so that people walked away thinking like, oh my gosh, I learned something new today?
Yeah, I think, you know, I think the whole thing with AI and driving adoption is making it less intimidating right now. Because, I mean, like you see, Yogesh, right? Every time you go on LinkedIn, every time you go on TikTok, there's
Mhm.
10 different AI tools, there's 10 different updates every single day from these different technology companies, and it can
Yeah.
become very overwhelming very quickly.
Yeah.
And so I guess as part of my talk, the message and the actions that I wanted people to take is to just think about it in the context of your role and what you do and what your own mission is, right? And so
Mm.
I have this framework that I walk people through, and
Okay.
it's called the 4 C's of, AI adoption, and that stands for context, capabilities, communication, and challenge. So the first bit is, context, understanding how AI fits into your own world, how it fits into your workflows, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
looking at it from that lens. For example, if you're a data analyst, do you need to care about which new AI image generators there are? Probably not,
Right.
right?
Right.
Um, so yeah, first is the context. Second is the capabilities, right? Because AI is adapting so much, so fast that unless you're keeping on top of the capabilities, you might be missing out on features, technology that could be helping you with a certain task. And
Hmm.
so I think it's really important to keep on top of obviously how, what are the different capabilities, what is planned in the next 6 months, how do we align those capabilities to the context of your role. And then
Right.
the next one, communication, is mainly around, how can you, in order to get good results when using generative AI tools, you need to be able to effectively communicate what you want it to do, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's important now with large language models, and it will likely be important with AI agents as well in the next phase of this
Yeah.
technology. So those are the kind of key things, and obviously challenging yourself is to just challenging yourself to stay curious and start and experiment, really.
Right.
How would you feel about, I mean, I feel like it seems very obvious, but those simple things, people don't put the connect the dots together usually.
I agree with you 100%. And I love the fact that you're starting with context first, because you're right. You need to make it relevant to your role or relevant to your subject matter expertise to figure out how can generative AI tools or large language models help you in getting your work done, right? I think that should be a given. I think the place where, like, I'm kind of like landing on right now, and this is some of the messaging I'm doing right now externally, is that don't use AI just to bolt it onto an existing workflow and say, oh, it's that this is the be all and end all. You almost have to think of, creating AI native solutions which may
Yeah,
actually redesign your workflow entirely because of that. You know,
absolutely.
so that's a conversation I started last week, and I'm just curious to hear what your thoughts would be about that.
Absolutely. I think, it's imperative to reconsider new ways of working rather than just layering things on top. But I
Yeah.
think in order to do that, you have to have like a systems thinking approach. You need to be able to connect your AI knowledge with your understanding of the business processes that you follow, right? And
Yeah.
only then can you understand, okay, well, we can reinvent this system using AI because I know what AI is capable of, and I
Hmm.
know how easily it could be implemented or what the
Yeah.
return on investment could be. Yeah,
Yeah, I love that. And you're right. You have to look at it from both perspectives, right? Because if you don't understand that domain area well enough, then you can actually design it for the wrong solution. At the end of the day, it becomes a problem then rather than a solution. At the end of the
absolutely.
day,
But
right?
that's why it's
You
so important, right? That everybody become educated and upskilled on AI because
Yeah.
ultimately it's not just going to be technical people that are required to build out these solutions. The
Hmm.
people using them need to
Yeah.
be adding input into what this solution could look like and where it could fit in.
Exactly. So in your experience, working with companies in this space, you started by saying it's about adoption, right? So part of it's, people are following existing work processes and they build their behaviors around that. So if you're trying to have them adapt or adopt a new set of behaviors, is there a process you take people through as you do that, or what's your approach on that?
Yeah. So yes, it is a process. I think it depends on, and for anyone listening, like there's not like a single playbook that people can follow, and
Hmm.
tomorrow you have a fully first AI organization.
Yeah.
But it really depends on what industry you're in, the size of the business, and the nature of business. But I think that when it comes to AI adoption,
Hmm.
it's really important that companies take a holistic approach, right? So I know that a lot of companies go into just, there's two ends of the spectrum here. There's
Yeah.
companies that don't put a stance out on anything and then let everybody, all the employees kind of just use whatever tools they want. It's called bring your own technology to work. You know, like bring your own BYOB, but BYOT. Um, but and then you have companies that are obviously bringing in lots of trainers, and they have enterprise versions of Gemini, Copilot, ChatGPT.
Yeah.
But I guess what's integral is, first of all, understanding what your AI strategy is. So
Hmm.
how can AI help you with your overall business goals?
Hmm.
Second of all, having some sort of AI readiness assessment to understand what your current state is. And then
Hmm.
based off of that, doing the training and doing the upskilling that is needed. Because I think you have to have a good understanding of where you are now and where you want to be.
Yeah.
And I think that companies rush to, sometimes roll out technologies and assume that that is enough. That, oh, if you've got an chat GPT license, that should be enough. People should just be getting on with it.
Yeah.
Actually, we don't do that with other softwares. I mean, in your experience with other software rollouts and stuff, you've been in enterprise, it doesn't work like that, does it?
No, it doesn't. No, not at all. In fact, as you were saying, I was thinking about, deployment I did at my last corporate job, where we had designed a prediction tool using machine learning and AI for customers. So we were predicting whether the customer would stay with our business, or whether they would churn out or not. So, as we were building out the tool, there was a quarter or two in build out and validation of the tool. But as the technical team was doing all that, I was working with the sales team to say, how will we deploy this when the time comes? So that the the sales rep in the field knows what to do with this, when to look at it, how to look at it, what should they interpret out of it, and all that kind of stuff. So I had to literally create, like presentations and documentation, like an FAQ list and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, to kind of like make it easy. And even after we did the first, couple of deployments, starting with the sales leadership team, people were like, some of our guys, they're not numbers oriented. So, but all you're sharing are numbers, So I was like, oh my gosh, we need to go back to the technical team and say, can you create actually, script that makes it, where the numbers drop in the context of a sentence, so that people say, oh, I'm looking at customer, place name of customer, and their business has been doing, ABC in terms of order volume, blah blah blah. We had to literally go design that, because we were like, oh my gosh, they will not know which number to look at and in what context. We have to actually create a script for them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You
It's
know,
a whole change process, isn't it? It really
it's
does come down to a thorough change process.
it completely is, right? And part of the challenge in that process is that you don't know what you don't know until you actually get into it.
Absolutely. And another problem and challenge is
Yeah.
is that it's very people focused. You know,
Hmm.
to get the most out of AI, you have to get people using it.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge with that, and what I found, is that everybody has a different sentiment towards AI,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that can hinder, I guess, adoption. And how do we get people to use it, and how do we take something that is quite literally a blank canvas? Like, when you log on to ChatGPT, it's a blank canvas. You don't
Yeah.
know, you don't know what you don't know, like you said. And it can be a little bit not very inspiring, I guess. When you
Yeah.
log on, you have to think about what to use it for. And I think
Correct.
I think from my conversations, at least when I do training, is a lot of people just miss out because they just didn't know that this was possible using ChatGPT, or this was possible using Gemini.
Yeah, yeah. So in other words, what you're really saying is that, because you're starting with the blank canvas, you almost have to show them the use cases, right? Just
Yes.
to inspire people to say, oh, I did not, like you said, and I didn't know you could do XYZ things. So you have to kind of like, demonstrate the use case, so they can connect the dots and say, okay, now I get what you're talking about. And then the thing that really makes me, smile at times is like, I get asked the question, can I do this with ChatGPT? I'm like, why don't you try it and see what happens? It's my
Yeah.
response, And that's when the curiosity factor finally kicks in my opinion. That's like the inflection point in the person's mind, basically, when they start
Absolutely.
asking the, can I do this? So
Yeah. And my approach, I mean, in my business, my approach to training is always use case led because honestly, there's
mm,
so many things that you can do with AI these
yeah,
days. But what is the point of showing something that the end user is never going to use?
right,
So it's really important to obviously for companies to evaluate and build out their AI rollout plans based on those really impactful use cases in the beginning
yeah,
and learn from that. You know, roll it out within like maybe one department for this two or three particular use cases,
yeah,
see what worked well, see what didn't work well, and then use that as a framework for rolling out to the rest of the organization or rest of the high priority use cases.
yeah,
Um, Really important. And, you know, I mean, look, there's you go on to, for example, these different tools, right? Let's just use ChatGPT because it's easier. You log on to ChatGPT, there's 10 different models to choose from. I mean,
correct.
nobody has the time to log on and, you know, educate themselves. What does 4 stand for? What does O1 stand for? What's the difference between O1 and O3? You
Yeah.
know, people are doing their day jobs and then they have to learn about AI as well. It can get challenging.
Exactly, exactly. So with that said, like, are there like certain tips that you give people, especially from a change management perspective, um, of simple practical tips they can use. So like let's start even with, like, you log on to ChatGPT. They have like 6 different models that are available right now, right from O1 to 4.5 now, which launched a couple of weeks ago. What do you tell
Yeah.
people to do?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I guess, you know, as I mentioned before, it's very much about, you know, there is no shortcut, unfortunately. You do
Yeah,
have to, you do have to do some self-education on what are the differences between these different modules or what are the different capabilities available to me. Say, for example, they're not using ChatGPT, they're using Copilot.
yeah, yeah,
What is in the remit of Copilot, right? And how does that link to my work? So within ChatGPT, right, you have custom GPTs, you have reasoning models, you have
yeah,
internet search.
yeah,
And so I would encourage people to test each one of them, explore how they could be potentially used, and identify ways in which to incorporate that into their day to day workflows. Say, for example, the best way to start, honestly, is doing the opposite. First, make a list of what you do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis on a repeatable basis, right?
right,
Identify those tasks that take up a lot of brain power and are, you know, things that you do on a regular basis. These are going to be the best place for you to start testing how to use AI because you'll be able to see like that return on investment within in terms of your time and effort, but also, you know, it will help you test and experiment more frequently.
right.
Um, Once you have that list, you know, have a look to see, okay, can I use ChatGPT for this piece of data analysis work that I do? You know, to what extent can I use it? Is it just to do very high level research on, you know, on the
Mhm.
data that I have, or can it actually perform functions and you know, do deeper analysis on that data? So I think it's about matching your your responsibilities and your tasks and
Mhm.
experimenting against the different capabilities within, for example, like ChatGPT. But it does take some work. You know, you do need to sit there and experiment with these new tools and figure out what they could potentially be used for. But in terms of the different models, you know, you can classify them under two buckets. You've got kind of normal large language model or multimodal models. And then you've got the reasoning models. And the difference with the reasoning models is they do exactly what it says on the tin. They reason, they think through your question. And so
Mhm.
the response that you get is a lot more refined. It's you know, more thoughtful, if I can use that word with this AI. It's more,
Yeah,
and it's you know, it's a much better output for particular types of tasks.
right. And we talked about, so there's a reasoning model you said. There's also the multimodal models that are out there, of course. and you already mentioned, examples like ChatGPT and Copilot, but there's another one that's come out recently called Manus that you just started playing with, right? So, before you get into what your experiences with Manus, even the selecting which model or company to go with, have you found that that's a question that people keep on asking you as well? And what kind of suggestions do you give them?
Yes, I get this question all the time. And most of the time, that question is driven from the worry around data privacy and
Okay.
hallucinations and bias and those concerns that people naturally have.
Hmm.
And I guess the advice is that, and you're going to hear this everywhere, everybody has the same answer, but don't put anything into the models that is sensitive confidential data if you're
Hmm.
using personal accounts. If you're using an enterprise account that is given to you by your workplace, then I think you're fine. They've already considered all of that for you.
Hmm.
um, there's better protections for those enterprise licenses, etc. But yeah, that would be the advice, is not to use any confidential information within those personal subscriptions.
Sure. So, and do you see differences in the quality of the output, whether it's Perplexity or Claude or ChatGPT? Like I've seen differences, but I'm curious to hear what your experience is like.
Yes. It depends on the task. Like I've mentioned before,
Yeah.
it depends. But I would say that for creative writing and something with a bit of flair that I want, then I will definitely always go to Claude. Now, I tend to go, for example, I use it for LinkedIn posts, I use it to do blog posts, whatnot. So anything creative.
Hmm.
And the reason is because I find myself doing less touch up work
Okay.
on the output. For everyday tasks, I use ChatGPT, and I've stopped using Perplexity now because of ChatGPT's search capabilities and its reasoning capabilities. So I
Hmm.
tend to use those two features in tandem to carry out work. Another one that I really love, I don't know if you've used it yet, Yogesh, is deep research on ChatGPT.
I've used it. It's
Excellent.
a, it is amazing, isn't it? Even Claude has that too,
Excellent.
by the way, right? So,
Yeah.
um, I actually thought that the deep research feature that they've launched, which is what, maybe a month old, not even, I think, um, from a market research perspective, can do a significant amount of your work for you. And it organized it in such an amazing way with all, and citing all the sources that it looked at. Like,
It's
I did one
wonderful.
for a colleague of mine recently, and it looked at like 37 different sources.
Yeah,
Like, imagine how much time it would have taken for us to a find those sources, and then b read them, and then figure out how to actually integrate everything into one place. This was done within like 3 or 4 minutes, basically. It was
absolutely.
absolutely
It's mind
incredible.
blowing. It's
Yeah.
I honestly feel like a lot of people don't realize how far we've come just in the space of 2 years. It's actually
Yeah,
scary,
it
right?
is very
Because
scary.
if
Yeah.
we've got this far in 2 years, God knows where we will be in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Which leads me on to obviously the next thing, which how you started this particular conversation was about Manus.
Yes. Tell,
So
tell us what is Manus first of all. Not maybe not everybody knows what it is. But let's start with that
yeah,
first, and then you can tell us what your experience has been so far.
yeah, I can do my best at, I mean, definitely chime in. But um, so Manus is essentially like a type of AI agent. Now, AI agents are what is happening right now within the space of AI.
Yeah.
So to define AI agents, they are essentially autonomous programs that can perform tasks, they can make decisions, they can interact with environments and tools without the need of too much human input. So
Hmm.
they're not the same as automations, right? Because with an automation, you need a very defined workflow. And typically, you need to have a set of criteria for your input and your output.
Yeah.
Whereas AI agents, they work more dynamically. So you provide the agent with a goal and you connect it to a bunch of tools within an environment. And so long as it has that, it can work autonomously and dynamically to figure out what route should I take to achieve this goal. and it can take any route. So that's why this is so powerful, because it's that one step towards AGI. And I use that term loosely because we still haven't really defined what that actually means. But
Yeah.
I believe that AI agents is where we're genuinely going to see the most impact in terms of the workforce. And we haven't seen that so far because the generative AI models that we've been using are very much tied to a human, right? I need to prompt the model to get a
Yeah.
response back.
Yeah.
So Manus is essentially a version of like an AI agent, and it's a Chinese model. It essentially works by taking an instruction or taking whatever you want it to do, and it opens up like a browser to carry out the action for you. And so I used it in the instance of doing some research, and it was mind blowing because I gave it a very simple prompt to say, hey, can
Mhm.
you do research on this industry?
Yeah.
And it came back with about 8 different files prepared for me. And this included
Yeah.
different Word documents with detailed research for each of the different kind of topics that it created. And it included about 10 different charts and graphs within 10 minutes.
Charts and graphs too. Wow.
Yes,
Oh my God.
in 10 minutes. Yeah.
Oh my God. So essentially, for if you're like working in management consulting, or if you're working as an analyst, on a brand, for example, you're preparing, your business review for a, particular brand, this can do all the analysis for you in a way, if you give it the right prompt in a way, right?
Yeah. And look at this, right? This is something that is quite new. AI agents have really only become mainstream, well, in terms of conversation this year.
Yeah.
And already we have tools like this. And so I was less concerned about, when I was using this tool, I was less
Mhm.
concerned about the content of its output, having a
Yeah.
look at is this good quality work, etc.
Yeah.
Because that is important. But what is more important is that we have this capability. You
Yes.
This is just a beginning. All of the other stuff can be refined and it will get better.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Because well, yes and no, right? Because part of it is right now relying on large language models to pull your data, right? To do the analysis and give you the output that you're looking for. But as you tie these things into, a combination of, large language model plus your proprietary data, that's when it becomes super powerful in giving you the output. But then here's something I heard last week. Uh, from somebody who I met actually at the airport lounge, for like 5 minutes, and we got into a conversation about this topic. He brought in the phrase data poisoning. Have you heard that word before?
No.
Um, where, from a cybersecurity perspective, you could have nefarious actors who can poison the database with bad data, which then leads you to get bad output as a consequence, right? So
Yeah.
there are firms that are basically building out systems now to make sure that that bad data does not enter into the large language model, basically, or into your database, or whatever the case may be, basically. And I so he kind of like introduced that topic. I was talking to a startup company from California a couple of days ago, where they're actually building that whole system out right now. Which, if Alex is listening in, he's the guy who talked to me about it a couple of days ago. Really, really cool stuff in terms of how they're building out the entire process for you to clean the data and to protect your data, your database, so that you don't have, this phrase data poisoning happening to your data, basically.
Yeah, it's incredible that as much as the technology is evolving, the
Yeah.
threats are also evolving.
Correct. Exactly. Exactly right.
Yeah.
So it's exciting in one side, but and I think this is where this constant tension that's happening, I think, between people, right? Where they're the early adopters are trying to bring all this new stuff out, and then there are all these other people who are like being skeptics because they're worried about all these kinds of issues that I just talked about. So it's not that
Yeah,
one is right and the other one's wrong. It's that both are right. It's a matter of how you can hold both truths at the same time in your mind, basically.
I think so. And I think that's, like I said to you before about the people resistance because
Yeah.
there's these valid concerns, and people don't feel safe. They have different sentiment towards it, and I think that's what's causing the actual adoption to lag behind as well, right? So
Yeah.
for example, in the UK, only 1 in 10 people use generative AI daily, right? That's not actually
Wow.
a high number, considering that,
No.
considering that most people do and have used generative AI, but they
Yeah.
just do not use it frequently enough on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
And I think that that comes down to, some of the points that you just said, highlighted here, is that there are serious challenges
Yeah.
to be addressed.
Do you feel that the regulatory environment will help with that process? Because with things like GDPR, I think there's this whole AI policy that's coming into effect in the UK, in Europe right now. Do you think that will help improve the adoption process, or do you think that's actually still going to be another hurdle to overcome?
I think in the EU we have the EU AI Act,
Yeah.
and that's been quite important. It's become more of a topic of conversation that I've noticed here in and around London.
Yeah.
Globally, I don't have that much context as to what's happening in other countries,
Yeah.
but I'd say that it's really helped clarify things for companies in the UK, at least, because there's a clear distinction. There's a clear, obviously, guidelines as to which which AI use cases and which AI solutions are like high risk,
Yeah.
and which ones aren't. Um, and the only thing is, though, I guess, is that with with this regulation, and it can sometimes hinder progress as well. So that's another sentiment that I hear often in Europe, is that Europe is over regulated, and due
Yeah.
to that, we haven't been as competitive in the AI race as other countries. So
Right.
it's a very twofold thing.
Yeah.
It's a challenge because,
No. Yeah.
I mean, the US is winning. Like, you've got amazing tech, amazing innovation coming out of the US.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. I get that. But at the same time, I think also, like, one part is to give that safety net, so that people know what the guardrails are, and I think that's where the regulations play a big role, right? Um, but I'm kind of like poking at more around the adoption side of it, because when you have 10% adoption rate, like you were saying for the UK, right, to get it to 20%, to get it to 40%, right, that means that a higher percentage of the population has to feel comfortable that whatever they do with generative AI, it's going to be good for them, it's safe for them, and it's going to add some sort of efficiency or value to their lives, basically,
Yeah.
right? So
Within, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't touch on this before, but within the actual AI, with the
yeah,
EU's AI Act, is,
yeah.
it's actually mandatory for companies to upskill and train their employees on AI if they have AI solutions that they're using in house.
Oh, I did not know
That
that.
is
Okay.
an incentive, obviously. That's an incentive for companies, but
Yeah.
it's still a bit slow here, I would say, in terms of adoption. It's not. I
Right.
think. I think my concern is that technology is moving really fast,
Hmm.
and the adoption is still very slow. I still have
Right.
companies reaching out to me to do an introduction to generative AI. So yeah, that kind of tells you a bit about the disparity.
Right. I get that. I get that. So, given like you said, the technology is moving, at an accelerated pace. It's hard to keep up. We both know that, based on our own experiences that are going on right now. Um, Adoption is slow. Are there things that companies are doing right to help with adoption, or are there things that companies are doing wrong with adoption? What's been your have you been able to glean any insights in that context?
Yeah, I think what companies are doing right is having a adoption plan. So there was a report by McKinsey as well. I can reference it later. I might have it open. I think it's called the State of AI Global Survey,
Hmm.
and it's mainly around AI adoption and how successful companies I mean, companies that have been successful with AI, what have they done in terms of driving AI adoption?
Right.
And it's these four things, right? So it's establishing governance and strategy. So it's having a clear roadmap of, where we are now and where we want to be.
Hmm.
Having clear KPIs as well, because I think a lot of people, you know, are sharing this message of productivity gains, but what does productivity gains actually mean? How can we measure that?
Right.
So having some clear kind of KPIs in place and communicating that value to employees, right? So having leadership actually have a stance and lead by example on this. So
Hmm.
that's one thing. The second thing is building out the employee awareness and training. So again, this is where we get into the training and upskilling.
Yeah.
I guess to make this really work is having use case based or role based AI training, because it
Hmm.
only makes sense if it's in the context of your role, as we've said before.
Right.
And again, it's making aware of these are AI's capabilities, but also here are the risks and concerns. So
Hmm.
being very transparent about what the risks and concerns are, because then you're safeguarding yourself and you're protecting yourself, you're educating your employees on how to use it and how not to use it. And we've obviously seen so many ways in which this has gone wrong for certain companies.
Yeah.
It big brand reputational risk, right? um,
Exactly.
the third one is like implementing AI around the business processes. So think about it like this: you've got your strategy, you've given your training, everybody's hopefully at a same level now.
Yeah.
Once we have that knowledge, you'll notice that people start getting creative and thinking, okay, where can we start embedding this into our workflows? And this is where the ideas come out for how to actually transform workflows and business processes. And this is where you can really start tracking those metrics and KPIs too. So it's thinking about it from the business process lens and where you can actually transform a piece of that process or the entire process itself using
Hmm.
AI. And I've seen this happen really well, actually. And there's lots of great use cases about, how AI can transform business processes. It doesn't have to be just a singular siloed thing.
Right.
Um, and then finally, it's about, making sure you have that feedback loop. So I think what works well is not just having like a top down approach, but also a bottom up approach when it comes to driving AI adoption. Really,
Amazing.
really listening to the concerns.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I think, as you've like, you pointed like some of the, the things that companies can do right, getting, the strategy, the governance, the systems, the training, and then, making it very specific to the person in the context of their role. I think that makes a lot of sense. Um, and you also talked about the reputational side, that when things don't go right for you, right, which is the downside. And we had Paige Lord last, in our last show, talking about that very issue, right? And from a responsible AI perspective, I'm curious that as you're seeing this evolve, right, you're in a way, you're also talking about the future of work, right? So are you thinking that that we're about to enter a new age of creativity as a consequence, or is that, am I being too bullish for this?
Creativity, it's so I think it's such a subjective you know experience as well as a term.
Yeah.
um, I think really the question we should be asking is, how do we define intelligence going forward?
Hmm. Okay.
Right, this is something that I highlighted on in my TEDx as well. I think i think we have to, going forward, we have to disconnect how we describe intelligence in terms of not just likening it to our own intelligence,
Hmm.
because it doesn't really make sense to. At the same time, we are biological creatures, we've
Yeah.
evolved, we carry genes, we carry knowledge within our DNA, and we learn from our experiences, we learn from our five senses. And that gives us certain superpowers. Whereas AI, it has its own superpowers, right? It doesn't have the biological experiences that we do. However, you can argue that it's intelligent, but in its own way.
Hmm.
And that's
Hmm.
how I would kind of see it. And this is, I guess, I think this is starting to become a bit more and more questioned as well as we go forward. Is how do we define intelligence, and how has intelligence actually changed over the history of time as well?
I don't even know how to answer that kind of question right now. Yeah, I have to think about this one, because that's such a deep question that you're asking. Because, um, like I think back to, from, and again, I'm completely stereotyping here, but, like, from the Stone Age, where, when the wheel was invented and the fire was discovered, that changed intelligence at that point,
That's
and you could
right.
just keep on going forward from there. The steam engine, or the printing press, or whatever. Those were like major, like, inflection points that changed the trajectory of human history, right?
Yeah.
So when you talk about intelligence here now, I'm thinking, like, is is it augmented intelligence? Is it supplemental intelligence? What are we really talking about? And I think that's why you're asking the question, which I think is a good question. Which,
It is,
you
yeah,
know,
because it's also linked to creativity, right? It's linked to everything that we define as
exactly.
having value and having meaning.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I went down the path of creativity is that, a lot of the, you know call it the reapplication of ideas, or, the organization of information in a structured manner, which we also do, right? That's being taken over by AI tools,
Yeah.
right? Which gives us the space then to actually allow our minds to wander and to think differently. And, and is that the reason why, to your point, like, our intelligence is changing because we're thinking more differently now, because we're not doing all that organizational stuff anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, in
you know
some way, I think that's the point. In other ways, it's we call it artificial intelligence, but we always likening it, and we're always trying to create something in the form of our own intelligence. But
yeah,
it would never have the type of intelligence that we do, because we are biological creatures, right?
yeah,
AI is a machine; it works with ones and zeros,
yeah.
and so it's a totally different form of intelligence. Um, and I think going forward, that kind of helps us define things like AI generated art and creativity, and you know, it may even, I think, even discussing and opening up that conversation may even help people adopt AI better, because ultimately
Yeah,
people might, I mean, it, right? Like, people feel threatened when they hear the word AI, artificial intelligence.
correct. Yeah, that's true. And if it's seen as something, I've always believed this. I think, too many companies have talked about this from an efficiency perspective. I think that's the wrong conversation, actually. I think it's a value added conversation we should be having. What is the value that AI brings to your life? Personally, professionally, and is it enhancing value in a way that you could have never done things before?
I agree.
And if if does that help actually create that kind of, like, engagement with people? You know,
Yeah. Yeah,
so
absolutely. I think it does, I mean, personally, because I think just from the technology that we've had so far,
yeah,
that sense of empowerment, that you have when you've got mental block, you're looking at a blank screen, and
yeah,
now finally you have a tool that you can just give it a bunch of ideas, no structure to them at all, and
yeah.
already have like a good draft, um, something that we wouldn't have had before.
Not at all. Not at all. And well, we could have gotten there, yes, but it would have taken a heck of a lot of time to get there. So,
That's right.
you
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
so I have a couple more questions for you, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. Looking forward, you already said that. Look, in 2 years, look how far we've come. With AI, generative AI, agentic models is obviously something that's a big conversation that's happening this year. Are you willing to venture and look forward to say what would be the one or two things that's on the horizon that you think will come to fruition?
Um, I like how you position that question. Are you willing to? Because, it's we don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 months, let alone, yeah,
Exactly.
it's
So
tough. But
I
that's,
don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm just curious to hear what do you think is on the horizon, I guess is the, the simpler way of asking the question.
I think that a couple of things. First of all, we're going to see more mainstream news and tools around AI agents. I
Hmm.
already have 10 companies reaching out to me weekly asking to do collaborations and work with them on their agentic workflows that they're building out for enterprise and for other domains as well.
Yeah.
So we're definitely going to be seeing agentic AI enter enterprise 100%. It's already
Hmm.
happening.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's going to be happening, and that will obviously really shake up, I guess, certain roles and the way that companies operate. I think also we're going to see the rise of domain specific AI tools.
Hmm.
I think obviously we've had great success with these like general purpose, off the shelf tools, but what we've noticed is that again, the adoption and the use cases seem to be a little bit less clear for everyday people, and so you see a lot of existing companies, for example, even like Salesforce, HubSpot, they're integrating different AI solutions into their service offerings, and we're going to see more kind of domain-specific AI solution providers enter the market, I think.
Yeah, and you're actually segueing me into being able to say this in the coming weeks. I'm going to be talking to a couple of companies that are, I think, doing exactly what you're describing. There's one company out of the Czech Republic I'm hoping to talk to in May. Um, yeah, I think it's in May, where they are like domain experts and they've got solutions which they walked me through their solution and I was just totally blown away by how much you can do using agentic models, basically. So, um, you know, everybody stay tuned for that one because that's going to be an interesting one. The company's called Fifth Row.
Yeah,
I'll be talking to the founder of that company as part of my my podcasting thing.
amazing.
But
Look forward to it.
yeah, and I think the other point that you made just now around overall domain expertise, I'm fully sold into that because I do think that you'll have to create you know that as a way to kind of like help with adoption at the end of the day as well, because adoption and scalability are the two things that I think are going to become the bigger conversation also,
Yeah.
alongside the technology itself.
Scalability for sure. Yeah. And it's taking a simple chat interface and transforming it into something useful within a particular industry.
Yeah.
uh, you know just incredible work that's being done to transform traditional industries using AI. I
Yeah.
mean, in your local GP, in your local dentist, they're now using AI powered tools to book your appointments, to
Yeah.
manage your appointment notes and things like that. Like,
Yeah.
they're using it now within these small shops,
Yeah.
and so this is incredible. It's really, really transforming the way that the economy operates, and traditional roles that we have as well.
Exactly, exactly. So last question, Manisha, because we're almost up, to the top of the hour. I can't believe we've been talking for over 50 minutes right now. So, as you look forward, what would be that one piece of advice you would give people as they're listening to us today? Like, we've talked about adoption. You obviously spent so much time, thinking about that question. That's why you had your TEDx happen in the UK. You run your business based on that, right? And like you said, you're getting so much traction as a consequence. So as people are, embracing it, they're curious, or if they're just starting out, is there one piece of advice you'd give everybody about this area?
I would say, don't wait to start. Just start.
Mm.
Even if you don't feel confident, even if you don't know everything, even if you have never used these tools before,
Yeah,
now is the best time to experiment and learn, and do not feel like you're alone. Right? There's a whole spectrum of, I guess, people in their different stages of adoption right now, and
hmm,
actually, a majority of the people are still getting used to and still getting up to date with this technology. And so, when
yeah,
you come on LinkedIn and when you come on these social medias, don't let the noise hold you back. Just start experimenting, start using in your day to day, and I promise you, you will start seeing the benefits and results.
That's amazing. And I completely agree with you because it is about starting and it's about overcoming that fear factor. And it's okay if you get it wrong. That's totally fine. That's part of the learning process, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
amazing. Well, Manisha, I can't thank you enough for you taking time out from your busy calendar, and especially on a Friday evening for you. Decided to spend this hour with me, talking about this topic here today. So I can't thank you enough for being here today.
Thank you, Gosh. It's been a pleasure. I loved diving into all these different topics, and I feel like we've covered some really good ground today.
I think so too. And for everybody listening in, I'll be back again on April 4th, talking about the promise and pitfall of AI in the market research space with Tim Hoskins. He is the CEO of a market research company called Quester. I've known him for a few years, and he reached out to me and said, "Yogesh, we need to debate this question about the promise and pitfalls of AI." So he wants to debate me. So I've agreed to it. I don't know if I'm going to do a debate or not, but I'll certainly be curious to hear what he has to say. So that's coming up in a couple of weeks, same time, same place. And again, please follow Manisha on her platforms, on LinkedIn, on TikTok, and other platforms that she's on. She's got some incredible content that she's putting out there. And Manisha, thank you again so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
All right, goodbye, everybody.